Well, good morning, and I am another one from the West, and I feel like after these presentations decrying the harm that the West has done, that I should probably start with an apology, or at least a confession. And Ronald Reagan, one of our presidents, said that one of the most terrifying phrases is that, "Hello, I'm from the government, I'm here to help." And perhaps we should rephrase that and say, "Hello, I'm here from the West, and I'm here to help." But I guess if we broke it, then perhaps we should be at least part of the solution to fix it. And I hope that I can outline some of the things that we're trying to do to help contribute to that solution. Ronald Reagan also made the comment in his farewell address as he left the presidency of the United States that as government expands, liberty contracts. And when you think about that, and as we consider a lot of the presentations that we've heard, so much of the mischief that has occurred has been when government expands or assumes more power and more influence, and it usurps those jurisdictions that properly belong elsewhere, such as the jurisdiction of the church or the jurisdiction of the family, but certainly not the jurisdiction of the government and its powers. So when you think about it in this modern world, I can't think of many instances where the expansion of governmental power has resulted in more liberty or more freedom, especially when it comes to defining marriage, the family, and now in an even stranger time in history, what it means to be male and female. When institutions of government and their political muscle are flexed to impose a reordered society where marriage is reduced to nothing more than being with the one that you love, of course, for as long as you care to be with that person or persons. And when these same institutions conclude, without any supporting data, that children can do just as well being raised by two dads, two moms, or multiples or fractions of the same, the basic foundation of society is weakened. And when maleness and femaleness is no longer a biological fact, but now a fiction of the mind, and such a worldview is heralded by the institutions of government, we hang dangerously over the edge of the precipice where the sexual anarchists prevail and common sense and reality are overcome. But that need not be the case. We're gathered here at this Congress not just to complain and commiserate, but to assess the situation, diagnose the cause, and encourage each other to take wise action to advance the cause on behalf of the time-honored, history-tested institution of the family. Together we can stop this abusive expansion of government. As the executive director of ADF International, I oversee a team of approximately 20 attorneys that are stationed around the world at the seats of the institutions of international governance. As a legal organization, it's been our strategy to actively engage at these institutions to prevent the passage of destructive laws and policies, and to advance positive laws and policies in cases which protect the family. We're active at the Council of Europe. We're active at the European Union and Parliament, the European Court of Human Rights, the United Nations, both at New York and Geneva, and the Organization of American States, which influences Latin America, and elsewhere at the capital level. We've chosen these institutions because their combined reach impacts virtually every nation in the world. And it's the same reason that the secular left, and I use that term, Friedrich, because that's a Western division of ideology. The secular left has been using these institutions for decades now to achieve and advance their agenda. So why not take a note from their playbook and take them back? It is high time that they belong to us again to advance those values which we know actually help create a flourishing society and a flourishing world. And so to that end, we join with many of our allied organizations, many of which are here at this Congress, as well as our colleagues at Alliance Defending Freedom who are focused on the United States legal advocacy, to take back these institutions, to influence them in a right way. So today I want to share with you just a few examples of the items that we're tracking and involved in so you get a sense of the work that can be done, and if you are positioned to do so, become involved with us. But I want to start with some good news. The good news is, contrary to some of the things that we've been hearing, that there actually are some positive trends. For instance, at the European Court of Human Rights, they've determined there is no fundamental right to abortion under the Convention. The court also determined that there's no requirement that member states make same-sex marriage legal. It even has protected the sovereignty of member states to advance greater protections of this definition as the union of one man and one woman. And ADF International, along with some of you in this room, has had a role in the successful attempt to have Slovakia drop its LGBT action plan, and also assisted with the successful attempt to push for a referendum to achieve a constitutional protection of marriage in Romania. Of course, that could change at any time. The European Court did impose on Italy a requirement to have some sort of recognition for same-sex couples such as civil unions. But we have some ideas on how that can be addressed even at a national level. So as you inventory the countries around the world, you'll see that there's only about 22 countries, depending on how you count Great Britain and the United Kingdom. That means that there are somewhere around 171 nations that still have the proper definition of marriage. Well, if you're playing any kind of sport, that's a pretty good scoreboard. That's a very small percentage of the countries. They may be influential countries, but nonetheless, the majority is still standing on the right principles. So what we need to do is to ensure that there's no further expansion of same-sex marriage, and even better, that there's a reversal in those countries who have ventured into this dangerous social experiment and who are starting to realize the mistake that they've made. Together, this is something that the people and organizations represented at this Congress can achieve. We've also seen some positive developments in other parts of the world with regard to education reforms, with regard to sexuality education in the schools, especially in Latin America, where we've seen some success. So there is hope, and I want to start on that positive note before we change to some of the negative things. One of the things that we're monitoring in the European setting is the European Union, the Istanbul Convention. The EU could be on the verge of agreeing wholesale for its member states to a radical redefinition of gender with implications for the place of the family unit in society. The Council of Europe and the EU have agreed to work towards the accession of the EU to the Istanbul Convention, an act that was ostensibly directed at acts of violence against women, but is being hijacked to usher in the LGBT agenda. And as Stefan pointed out, this is the danger, the mischief that occurs when certain language is used. The old adage, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Well, that's what happens with some of these projects and proposals. They usher in and sneak in language that can undermine, really, its initial intent. And isn't it amazing how the secular left can hijack even the most innocent of subjects and exploit it to advance its agenda? If the subject's healthcare, of course, abortion language is inserted. If it's education, the LGBT sexual agenda is inserted. Good grief, if it's about clean water, you can bet somewhere in there they're going to put some language to link it to the secular left's agenda. Well, this action, which was supposed to address violence against women, but has been co-opted in the fine print, has some very dangerous language with you. It establishes for the first time in this binding document that gender shall mean the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. What does that mean? Well, I think it means if society can define it, you have to embrace it. And it can mean anything. It goes on to say that parties shall take necessary measures to promote changes in the social and cultural patterns of behavior of women and men with a view towards eradicating prejudices, customs, traditions, and all other practices were based on the idea of the inferiority of women or on the stereotyped roles for women and men. There's a lot of room in there for mischief. Such an obligation could eventually lead to severe infringement on the right of parents to ensure the education and teaching of their children in conformity with their own religious and philosophical convictions, plus freedom of religion. This provision is so broad in scope, and vague in terminology that it may become a vehicle for substantially redrafting educational materials on the matter, and there's no opt-out clause for religious schools. These schools may be sanctioned for not allowing boys into the girls' bathrooms and locker rooms and vice versa, as we've talked a lot about at this conference. Refusal to admit a child of an opposite sex to a sex-specific school, especially if the child identifies as a member of the opposite sex, will be classified under this convention as violence against women, whether that person is a female or not. A majority of the EU members have already ratified the convention, but the EU as an entity has not yet acceded to the convention, and the process is underway for ADF International and its allies to actively work to prevent this from happening. In another area, there was a draft report on surrogacy. We know surrogacy is being used primarily by the homosexual community to advance, obviously, what they can't do biologically, and that is to have children of their own. So it's something that needs to be watched. And they say this is a need that they have, and the rapporteur who submitted a draft report was Dr. Petra de Sutter, a transgender doctor who's the head of the Division for Reproductive Medicine in the University Hospital of Ghent that facilitates surrogacy procedures, and has made this recommendation that PACE should regulate the practice of surrogacy. That means removing state-based or local control. Now, our approach was twofold. First of all, to attack the rapporteur and have him removed simply because he's got a clear conflict of interest, both personally and professionally. And secondly, the report itself was defective and should be rejected just based on its substance. We lost on the first part, narrowly, but we did also win and got the report to be rejected, but by only one vote, and that happened in the committee meetings in Paris in April. But this sadly leaves us still exposed because the rapporteur said, well, this only defeats this particular report in its current form, and it can be brought back in a new form. Obviously, the secular left never gives up. They never sleep, and they never stop thinking about how to advance their agenda, and perhaps we should do the same. At the United Nations, some of you may have seen the more overt and aggressive actions of the UN. One example is the Postal Service is issuing their latest stamps under the theme entitled Free and Equal. Well, obviously it's a pro-homosexual theme, and you can see the concepts of same-sex relationships, children somehow being introduced into those relationships, and then the butterfly, which is their depiction of the transgender issue because somebody has to discover at some point who they're going to blossom into later in life. It's quite a despicable agenda, and there was objections by over 100 countries, which the Secretary General simply ignored. This is a very clear indicator of where we are in the pro-family fight at the UN today. The overt defiance on the part of the UN to the will of its members, but we are committed to restoring the UN to its founding mandate, which is to unite and serve its members, not to impose contentious and unacceptable policies on its members. On a related issue, the family was not included in the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, which was adopted in September of 2015. This is the agenda that will guide the development policy and its aid funding for the next 15 years. It's a shame that the central role of family was not recognized in this agenda. On the other hand, I guess it's perhaps a silver lining because anytime you start talking about those subjects, they tend to be hijacked, and perhaps at least we've avoided some of the mischief on that front. But we remain committed to working with UN member states to ensure that that developmental agenda is implemented in a way that respects the properly understood definition of the family as a fundamental unit of society. On a positive note, we've built a strong coalition at the UN known as the Group of Friends of the Family, which is active in both New York and in Geneva, with over 20 countries in both. This is an official pro-family group of countries that are very committed to the family, and while it operates under great pressure and is often limited in what it can achieve, it is led by fearless countries that are committed to protecting and promoting family at the UN. And Nigeria is one of those great partners. I know we have members here from Nigeria, and I want to commend them and their country for the commitment and stand that they have taken over the years. We also had an event last January in New York, which had over 100 delegates and ambassadors supporting the pro-family agenda. We had a keynote speaker of Tony Abbott, excuse me, former Australian Prime Minister and a valiant defender of the family. Well, sadly, we're running out of time to talk about some of the highlights that are happening, but I want you to be encouraged that there's a lot happening, a lot of good things happening. We've been able to thwart the effort to put in a lot of pro-abortion language and anti-family language in these resolutions. We have to watch them like a hawk. We actually had to send one of our team members all the way to Thailand, where they were trying to secretly insert funding language for pro-abortion aid to the tune of about $1 trillion, and we managed to call them on the carpet on that and keep that out. So please know that there is hope for these issues, and I look forward to working with all of you as we stand for the truth. As our friend here mentioned, Candy, talked about the importance of truth. George Orwell said it very well. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Isn't it time for a revolution? A revolution of truth where we stand and we speak the truth, because truth always triumphs. And truth expressed is truth empowered. And as long as we're truth tellers and we tell the positive narrative of family and life, then we know that we can influence the world, even from the West, and where we are here today. We may not always win the short-term battles, we know we will win the war. But I would much rather fight than lose in the short term than simply forfeit. And I think all of you are here because you are committed to that battle. And please let us know how ADF International can help you and serve you as you are out on the front lines, as we link arms with you, knowing that we can and we will win. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, time is running away, but if you have questions for the speakers, we may use other 5 minutes for punctual answer. Questions? Please.
Thank you for your talk about the ADF and the good work that they've been doing. I just wanted to draw your attention to some legislation that's about to be passed in Scotland and the UK. It's called various things. At the moment, I think it's called the Named Person Policy, or Getting It Right for Every Child. And this is a policy where there's going to be a government person allocated to every child under 16 to keep an eye on them in the house and to make a judgment. Thank you. This government person will have the capacity to decide if the family that is raising every child in Scotland is doing it well enough, and therefore to decide basic things about the child's schooling and healthcare, and whether or not the child can even stay with the family. So, as a homeschooling mother of 5 children in Scotland, I'm very worried about this piece of legislation.
Very good. Good.
Consider that we have the same problem with the Bulgarian family in Norway and many other countries. Yep. If the speaker had one minute comment, they may. Please.
You didn't have time. You should. Thank you. No, I don't want to make a big comment, because I just would like to say that usually when you're attending a conference, you cannot absorb all the information that you received, especially when it's not spoken in your own home language. So I really would like to encourage you to be patient until all those materials will be available in your own language on the website, and that way explore the knowledge of this conference, because it's a wonderful opportunity. You know, like one of my Russian friends said once, you won't hear the truth anywhere else. This is the only place where you will get it. So take full advantage of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frederick. Mark.
Regarding truth, and the last speaker, what you said, it's really important. And I like to link it to the vulnerabilities question of our opponents, of the contrarians. The vulnerability is clearly exposed with their concept of nature, which is absolutely stupid, if you allow me this word. And you stressed it, and others did, many others did. They live in a fictionalized world. And that's really the thing where we should cut into. They live in a fictionalized world, and they have no relation to the truth. And we can catch them there. We can catch them there and make them fall.
Stephen.
Just a very quick note. In the sense of positive recommendations, things that can be done, I meant to say this, but it's very important to engage artists and especially comedians. It's very powerful to make something look ridiculous. The other side is very good at this. They can make the natural family look ridiculous through their comedy show, through these other things. So I think we've been very slow to pick up on that point, to use comedy and to show the ridiculousness of some things that actually are pretty naturally ridiculous, but just need to be articulated as such. So be sure to talk to comedians, organize communities with artists and comedians who can make this case.
The last question, 2 questions, but briefly.
Okay, briefly. Questions, I think.
Microphone is there.
Thank you. Bruce Logan, I'm representing Family First from New Zealand. And the question, I think, is for you, Douglas. Do you make very much investigation into the candidates coming up for Director General on the UN?
We have looked at that. Right now, we're focused more on the judges who are being appointed to the ECHR. But we've talked about this is a new way for the Secretary General to be selected.
Yes, I know. There's a new process.
Yeah.
It's just a point of interest that one of the front runners is the next Prime Minister of New Zealand, who would be a very bad choice.
Yeah. And that's been part of the problem.
Extremely bad choice.
It's like picking the lesser of evils sometimes. But to the extent that we're trying to figure out how the process